this next session is really a sharing type session, and it's one that Charles and I will be leading, and it really is more about us listening to you. We have had a maintenance management system for a long time. It has had maintenance planning in that system since it was implemented, and yet we don't see many states utilizing that planning process. And so, there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of maintenance organizations don't do planning, but it's a trend that we see that should really pick up in the future. And we want to make sure that when you're ready for maintenance planning, that we have the tools there for you. And so Charles and I we're ready to listen to you as to what do you want to do in planning moving forward. If you want us to get it started, we've got questions for you just to kick it off and get it started.
We can put those up on the thing if you want.
Well, I was going to hold on. Yeah. Okay. Nobody wants to talk. And Rick, can you take some notes for us? Okay. Okay. We're going. Yeah. Really.
I can see you, Steve.
You know.
Trying not to make eye contact. You easy out.
I'm sorry. This individual behind me's messing with my bald spot. I'm not even dozing
Thanks.
off,
Okay, let's start with the planning process. I know you all have to prepare for your legislature, where you get your money from. How do you prepare your budget request that you send up to your leadership that rolls into your state budget, in your department's budget request that goes to the legislature? How do you put those numbers together? Steve?
In Idaho's case, basically we just request an operating budget that then kind of filters down from what the district want to do. And unfortunately, the reality of it is what did you get last year? If it's kind of what you want this year, and that's kind of really all we're due from an operations standpoint. We know we need to do more planning, and we're wanting to implement the planning and the tools within the product to do that, but we just haven't got there yet so that we can be a little more transparent in how we're utilizing those operating funds. So we're not really using it yet.
Okay. Pass it back to
Montana has a biennial appropriation, and the first year of the biennium is they call the base year. So what we spend in the base year becomes our base budget, and then we build on that if we need more needs. Every year maintenance takes over probably 20 to 80 miles of secondary roads, so we include that in our request, and then any employee or FTE needs, as well as any software needs.
Anybody else? Yeah. Alex?
It's Alex.
He's right very back.
I'll come back to you, Vincent.
And then let's go to Vince.
Yeah, Oklahoma's pretty much. Sorry, Vince. Oklahoma is kind of in the same boat as Idaho. You work with last year's budget, and as far as routine maintenance goes, the bigger challenge is depending on what political factors makes that number go up or down. It doesn't matter too much as finding a way to fairly distribute those routine funds to all of our divisions, districts. We get a lot of internal requests for justification of why did my neighbor division get this many thousands, millions more than these guys. He doesn't even have an interstate. I do. We have to, those are the bigger challenges we face. As far as special maintenance projects, a lot of that is pre-planned through another project management division. So Oklahoma's biggest challenge is just finding out how to fairly distribute the wealth when we get a number. And justifying it logically.
Both back to the districts and to the legislature itself.
Yes.
So let's open this up a little bit more. That's how you guys did.
In Louisiana, it's very similar to a lot of the states here. First off, though, for us, what it comes to they're going to take our operating budget, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to get your match for all your federal funds first. What's left over, operation gets. And that's the fact of how we're running it right now with the limited budget, like most states here are. Then at that point, basically, it's what you got last year. Now we just went through our budget process, and you can have what you had last year, and then you can ask if you have any special needs, any special more improvements. And we have been lucky enough here lately to be getting a little bit more money. A few $1 million here or there out of about a $390 million budget that operation gets. But our biggest challenge, I think, go back to Oklahoma. So Alex said in Oklahoma was it's distributing that money that we have across the different districts about where our needs actually are, and to justifying it, like you said. Right now, it goes off of, we do know, well, this one has ferries, this one don't. This one has more miles roadway than this one. This one has no interstates. So we use those factors, but I ain't gonna say that it's more of in a historical sense than it is really looking at it in a different way with actual coming up with formulas and saying how much each would get percentage-wise. Rather than, I know we just got our level of service, and once we get that put in, that's going to more drive into how the budgets are actually set at that point.
Okay. New Mexico?
I got voluntold. Well, we have the operating budget from the previous year, and we just try and divide that up between the 6 districts within the state to ensure that they have enough maintenance funds to accommodate any snow removal and roadway maintenance projects that have to take place.
Okay.
So it's a question of, if you're trying for additional budget, how does that get justified? And certainly one of the things Vince was saying there was needs-based, and being able to look at level of service and things like that. What about, and special projects? I think that you mentioned that, Alex. You're in front of the legislature, or at least the committee here. How is it that you really justify that request for additional budget?
Yeah, what tools are you using to put that request together? Are you using anything special, or are you just pulling out last year's budget and copying and pasting it? Okay, that was the same way we did it. That changed though when they implemented MMS, because did you know that in your current MMS system that you can pull up last year's expenditures or last year's budget and copy and paste it into next year's budget? And what used to take us days to put together, you can do in about 5 minutes now. And what we want to do is kind of drive the process to help y'all be able to do that with speed, whatever methodology you're using to create those budgets. And like Charles said, that one of the big things I know in my experience was in going over to the General Assembly, you really got grilled on what was the basis of your request. Being able to justify those monies and being able to receive the monies. really became a big issue. And we want to make sure that we're providing you the tools that when you put that initial request together, that you can easily pick up your mobile device and pull up the justification behind each of the numbers.
So just a bit of process here. Please just raise your hand if you want to make a comment. Please do, and we'll get you a microphone.
Yeah, this is a discussion.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit hard, but it's a controlled discussion. There's the microphone.
One thing that in a I guess a total asset management system that I think would benefit, especially for us. We do have crews that go out, and probably a lot of states have the same. That actually go out and they replace bridges. We actually lay asphalt overlays with our crews. We do that. It would be nice to have something when it actually competes. Those activities like that, or that are capital activities, if you want to say, to be able to compete against the capital dollars in a system and show that how much more if you reinvested that money instead of in this capital project having a contractor, that reinvested back into the operating budget or even buying the material with capital dollars or something along those lines, how much more work and how much more you could get out of your money for doing that work that way. Something along those lines to be able for that to compete against the other capital projects.
Set up essentially a trade-off between capital
Yes.
and maintenance. Yeah, that's a very interesting one, that actually. You got that, Rick?
Our legacy system had a trick built into it. Well, we called it 100% level of service. And what it was is we basically applied best practices to get the entire infrastructure up to what we called 100% level of service. And granted, that gave you a ridiculous number to give to your legislature, but it answered a question they hadn't asked yet. It was, what does it take to make the entire infrastructure perfect? Well, it takes this many $1 trillion. Okay, so how much did you spend last year? And then we kind of used that as a bargaining chip. You know you can't get perfection because you can't afford it. Here's what you gave us last year. You can already tell what the level of service is in your politician's mind.
That brings up the obvious question, Alex. So how did you determine where you were at now in terms of level of service? You know, how far up did you have to go?
In the legacy system, I can't say. A lot of this was developed before I was, in my position.
But it wasn't based on a survey.
It was not based on a survey. A lot of it was based, this is 1980s thinking, a lot of it was based on general accepted practices. If you're going to fix a guardrail, you're probably doing it with this many workers, this much equipment, this much material.
Right, so it was probably a classic old inventory-based stuff.
Yes,
where
very much.
You've probably heard me say it many times. You've got the 100 acres to mow, and you want to mow it 3 times a year. Guess what? That's 300 acres of mowing.
I've always used the argument that the legacy system and anything we use now is just giving us fuel for a guess.
Yeah,
They can change the whole thing if they want to, as soon as we give them that number.
right.
See, I waited this time. Okay, so you were talking about showing last year's expenditures, that you could show that in Agile. I'm the performance and cost technician, and that's what I report on every year. Is there a way, or do you have a report that actually shows you this is the work that you did by activity and this is how many people it took? And so you have those indicators also? Is that already like a standard report or something that Agile gives us?
It's a report that can be built for you in your system. Oh, okay.
It's actually a report we've done for a few states. It would be utilization reports. So we can actually show per activity what specific equipment you actually used, how many hours, same thing for the labor, and same thing for the material. So it would give you an idea of what you're actually using, and then it can give you a comparison of what the performance guidelines said you would be using. So it would essentially let you see what your efficiencies are. And also on the performance guidelines, we do have a standard report which will show you give you a breakdown of the actual unit costs that you're spending for material, equipment, and labor, and allow you to compare that to your performance standard. And you can also update the performance standard based on that breakdown. So once the data is in there, we can basically put it out any way you want it.
Thanks, Derek. Hey, Derek, won't you just stand up here?
Planning, man.
Yeah. The next question is, you get your money. It's certainly not what you requested. How do you make your distributions of that money down to your work units? Do you have a particular formula that you're using, or is it just pulling it out of the air and distributing it? And then to follow up on that, how do those work units plan their work out based on the amount of money that they're receiving?
Yeah, so first one first. How do you get it down to your districts, and is that formula based?
There was probably a formula at one time, but I think we're in that realm right now. Well, we've always done it this way, to be honest with you. In Idaho, there is no true maintenance division. I'm a maintenance services manager, but there's no maintenance division that basically oversees everything. It's basically done at the executive level under the chief of highway operations. And he allocates the fund through his DEs and what they think they need and things like that. Now, granted, that's the way we currently do it. I think those of us that know and understand the maintenance management system and what its capabilities and functions are, we know we need to get, more asset management minded in regards to maintenance and operations activities, asset management, and configure the system and use it as it's really designed. And when you really think about why we bought it and the requirements around what we wanted is really why we went with your particular system. So we're just a little bit behind the 8 ball in getting the system and our act in order and configured to really leverage its functionality right now. So right now it's just, this is what you got last year, and so Mr. DE, spend it wisely, because you're getting paid a lot of money to spend it wisely.
Is it fair enough to say, Steve, that you would like to do it more on a kind of needs basis? Is that, yeah?
At Ohio DOT, we started a process 2 years ago. So once ODOT gets their biennium budget at the district level, at the county level, we start with the maintenance is required to submit an annual work plan. That's based on required preservation strategies that they have to do and ready to pave strategies. Those are rolled up to the district level, and then each district administrative team has to present their funding needs. It's needs-based to the leadership team to get their allocation. And there's other factors, I think, in that decision. Pavement management needs. We are, of course, as everybody, in a shortfall in our capital program. So we are trying to send some of that capital work over to the maintenance crews.
That's what Vince was doing.
Like Vince was talking about, and we're just getting ready, actually, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to open up the work plan in the system, which we haven't used before. So that's where their submittals will be done at inside the system.
Okay, before you give that mic away, Darcy. So a little bit. So it's basically a sort of bottom-up approach where,
Yes.
where you get your folks down at the lower levels, kind of submitting upwards. You said needs. How do they determine their needs?
First of all, their preservation strategies are provided by our central office. So these are your required elements that you have to do: bridge cleaning, bridge deck sealing. There's 6 different categories of that: under drain maintenance, crack sealing. So that's our first set of needs. our second priority of needs are getting ready to pave strategies. Those are their needs. After that, it's what I want, what I think I need to get done by, assessing their system conditions and going out and prioritizing what those are.
Yeah, no formal condition survey process, but those guys know their roads, right?
No,
and they want to do a better job of their.
Yes, we
their
used to have a
culvert
formal condition process and a rating system, but it wasn't really based on your road inventory. So let's say I have 11,000 feet of guardrail in my county, and this district has 2,000 in the whole district. So it wasn't really a fair condition rating system. So they're looking at slowly bringing that back, perhaps.
Yeah, you definitely want to
And
weight
putting
it
that in
by
the calculation.
amount of inventory that you have. Yep,
Mhm.
yep,
Yes.
yep.
Anybody else? Vince?
Over here, Jim.
Oh, okay.
I'm from North Carolina, and actually the ones that really talk about it are not here, but we have something called the MCAP survey in North Carolina. And I guess to talk about the first question you talked about was about how legislators get their stuff. We have something called the MCAP, which we have surveyor inspectors that go out and inspect random sections of road. It gets dumped into the MMS system, and each section, ditching, shoulders, pavements. There's several things that actually get rated, and they have different levels of importance, and that comes up with a number, and that's rolled into an algorithm that tells them what kind of money it would take to bring your system back up to 100%. So that's kind of given to the legislators, and they usually give us 2 or 3% more than what we had last year, because they're not going to fund you at 100% of what you want. From that point, we usually get a budget coming down, and we take the pavement condition. In the past years, we have taken the MCAP study and rolled that into the pavement condition survey and lane miles, and come up with an algorithm of who gets what out of each division. This last year, we just used lane miles and pavement condition surveys. They left the MCAP study out of it. For what reason, I don't know, but we do have that kind of process, and it uses the MMS system to do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
When we get our dollars to the districts, at that point, the districts, every district, we have 9 different districts. They'll all do something a little bit differently. Some budget it all the way down to the gang levels. The others will just hold it more at the district level, and as they need it and they do request, they give them their money for request. And I think we may be in the same boat as a lot of people too. We're more, we'd love to use the work plan, and I think when we get level of service, we're going to start getting into the work plan and budgeting actually through that. But to be really truthfully honest with where our system is and some things, we're more reactionary than we are planning anyway. It'd be hard to put together a true work plan for everything they're going to do for the year, because a lot of it is just reactionary. You're reacting to things that are going down. You're reacting to calls that you have come in. So that's kind of where we are. So it's more of some do budget it down on a few little different areas, like for maybe bridge material or asphalt or things like that. But a lot of the other materials, it's in cost. It's more of a what do you need, and go ahead and purchase it when the request comes in.
Thanks, Vince. Comment that I would have on reactionary versus planning and maintenance. If you really think about it, most all your crew leaders have a maintenance plan in their mind, that things they want to get accomplished. And that's a plan. And you don't need to plan every single activity. You only plan maybe 70 to 80% of your money. And when you start utilizing a plan, you become more efficient in your operations, and it helps you start saying no to some of the requests that you get, or justifying why you're going to put them off because they're not in your plan. You know, and Mr. Legislature, if you'll give us a little extra money, maybe next year we can get to what you're asking for. So there's reasons that you might want to look at planning, but also I think as time goes by with the FAST Act, and after they get in the performance measures that the Federal Highway wants to include, then you're going to start seeing them looking at maintenance planning. And so, you know, you really need to be prepared to meet that animal when it comes.
Just going along with all this, down in District 5, which is Pocatello, Idaho, where I've actually worked, we're kind of ahead of the rest of Idaho. We kind of implement a lot of the stuff down there and do a lot of the innovation down in that area. I don't know why that is. It's just we're really active that way. But anyway, we do a thing called Primo. And we go out, and the guys actually they go out and Primo their whole road section. They're assigned a road section. They Primo that whole road section, every condition, whatever it may be. And there's about 55 of those. And they put a condition rating on those. And then I built a report in Excel that's all automated, and it color codes and gives them a condition grade report that shows them where they need to put into their plan schedule, which we already do. We have our regular maintenance scheduling stuff that they plan out for the summer, and then we have our special projects that we bring in that we think that we can have for what money we have available for those special projects, and then we just have things ready on the shelf. So when that money's there, that project comes off and it's ready to go. And we meet as foremen in areas, we meet every 2 weeks or even once a week, coordinating this and sharing of resources, and it's really made us really efficient in our abilities to go out and tackle our maintenance with smaller crews. So.
Charles or Jim, I guess I do have a question. Jim, you referred to the FAST Act and the performance measurements. As we know, they haven't been completely finalized, but you know, the HPMS, the feds are trying to leverage the HPMS to actually take a look. And of course, there is a report card that is created that basically shows the DOT what is the current condition. And I guess as a company, are you looking at any tools or applications for a DOT to help establish maybe those initial benchmarks, or to go through there and help identify how to raise or basically address that report card itself?
Dave, I think on the you know, kind of benchmarks and things like that, a lot of the HPMS stuff revolves around the pavement management side, right?
Heavily so.
So, you know, from the pavement management side, there's actually quite a lot of interesting talk going on, because HPMS is at that 10th mile level, and you know, most people manage their pavements at a much higher level. But you know, given that, you know, there's some ways around that we've kind of come up with that we should be able to really benchmark and look, you know, handle the MAP 21 FAST Act kind of performance, you know, future performance targets and things like that. So yeah, I think the answer to your question is we've definitely been thinking about it. We've definitely been talking to a few folks, but I would also say that that's slightly more on the pavement management side than maybe the maintenance management side. So.
Currently, but I guess from a pavement management side, I mean, a lot of those numbers, whether it be IRI or PCR, you know, you can do a major rehab, which will bring those numbers up. But in some cases, you can do more of a maintenance function, whether it's an overlay, et cetera. So, and I guess at Ohio DOT, you know, we try to go through, and typically there's a capital budget and there's an operational budget, but one impacts the other. Whether that's a case of you have a major rehab scheduled 2 or 3 years down the road, but the road is in such a condition there, you have some sort of basic overlay. You know, you want to know the two, because then you might go through, rather than do an operational budget, save that money and basically move your capital budget or your capital project up to address that issue, which they're different, but moving a capital up would free up operational funds to basically use elsewhere.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to have to carry on this because I can't help myself. So yeah, Dave, the classic thing for me anyway, my particular view on this is that, you know, if you're talking about pavement management, you should be able to be modeling those pavement preservation actions, if you like, treatments, in your pavement management. And so you should be able to kind of come up with an optimum mix between capital and preservation right there in your pavement management system. So yeah, I agree. My kind of version of trading off in that particular case, kind of going back to Vince's original thing, when you're talking about pavement specifically, you ought to be able to trade off between capital and maintenance, preservation in your pavement management system itself.
And actually, one of the things TxDOT was talking about, they're actually doing just that, where they have a 4-year plan in their maintenance system, and they're basically entering all the contract and in-house work, all of the projects they're doing, and these are basically just thin overlays when they're chip sealing. They push that data over to the pavement system, and it gets combined with the construction, and that's what they're actually using for their analysis.
For so many DOTs, that's two separate issues.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
you can do a basic overlay to hold it over until the capital project is ready, or move the capital project up. So, I mean, I just know it's operational there, and it's like, well, that is operational, but there is an impact, because if you can go and move capital funds earlier, then suddenly you don't have to do that overlay every third or fourth year to keep that road sufficient.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So at the Montana Department of Transportation, we use on the construction side something called a P3 process, Planning Performance Program. And that process looks at pavement condition, bridge condition, and congestion in Montana. And then allocates, horrible. If I have to wait 30 seconds, that's a bad day. So we allocate funding that goes into basically a software program. It comes out with a funding mix that goes to the districts, and then they have a mix of projects that are recommended from our pavement process. Now, the one thing that's confusing when you talk about maintenance, there's a lot of pavement preservation that goes on the construction side, a tremendous amount. In fact, the pavement preservation goes on the maintenance side is reactionary. So to mimic your comment, Jim, I would say that about 85% of our funding is planned, but 15%, which happens to fall in operations, is not, because it's reactive. So to echo Vince's discussion, it would be incredibly hard to use the planning function unless you could use it by what we do on a 5-year average. So you almost need 5 years worth of data. Then you start saying, okay, what are the things that I do in this 5 years, and how can I allocate my funding towards that?
Doug, you'll be pleased to know that you can do exactly that in the planning function in AgileAssets. You can actually go back and look at your last. In fact, Derek showed it actually yesterday. You can go and weight the different years even to get your averages. So kind of interesting. So let's change gears a little bit and kind of go maybe the kind of capital, the big expensive bridges and pavements. Yeah, definitely. And as I say, I would like to see us really modeling that stuff better in your pavement and bridge systems individually. And when you chuck out a pavement plan, it needs to have that kind of preservation stuff in it for sure. Back on the maintenance side, though, let's move on to the next level here, and kind of put the hard question out there. What if you had to hand down a budget to your folks that was 5% less? How would you decide what to cut?
In Idaho, and this happened several years ago, when they did receive less money, it was up to the district engineer to basically prioritize where his priorities were. And again, so it wasn't a centralized function. It gets pushed down to the individual district engineer and his staff to make that decision. That is a good question. I do not know how he makes that decision. So, generally speaking, Idaho rule number 1 is you have salt and sand for winter maintenance first. Beyond that, summer maintenance becomes secondary, and however much money they got left, they'll go try to get done what they can get done.
Yeah, we budget salt. We're fine. 3 million pounds a year. We're good. no salt, no snow plows. That's when we cut out. With 5%, we just stopped buying snow plows. No, seriously. On the 5%, they've asked us to produce an operating budget in scenarios where we had to cut in the last, I think repeatedly in the last 5 years, almost every year or every other year. What would you cut if you cut 5%, 10%, or 15%? And in those scenarios, what you would have to look at, unfortunately, would be there's things that you have to do day to day. You've got to cut the grass. Now, you may reduce it, reduce those costs on contract maintenance costs that you do on that side. You may reduce some of your herbiciding. We try to cut from the outside to the center line. There are things that we want to continue doing on the roadway. You still want to do your striping. You still want to do all that. But basically what it came down to cutting, unfortunately, in the shape that we're in right now with our vehicles, is we cut how much we spend on purchasing vehicles. I mean, now have a fleet because of that, and in the budget we've been in, we have now a vehicle fleet that the average, I want to request that we have a public plate that says antique on the license plate. But we actually have vehicles that average. Our average vehicle is 70% of our vehicles are between 10 and 20 years old. That's for our trucks and our work trucks and our passenger cars. So you cut the funding to that, and you also cut the funding a little bit to your unfortunately your supplies. The two areas that you can do a little bit of cutting. That's where you end up cutting, and then contract maintenance for the mowing and those kind of activities. So that's kind of where our 5% came from. We would try to work from the outside in. Even in Louisiana, we have to cut a lot more than a lot of the people with the climate that we have, but you try to let that grow a little more. It's not a safety factor. Try to get your safety factors first.
Yeah, so you're kind of looking at the kind of bang for the buck almost that you're going to lose, really working on that cost-benefit kind of thing and trying to lose as little benefit as possible for those dollars, overall benefit. I got to make a quick comment about the antique trucks. So in that very first presentation, I don't know if you noticed during Joe and I's segment, there was he flashed up a picture of a guy sitting in a herbicide truck, and that herbicide truck definitely could have had an antique sign on it, but it was still going strong. I have to admit it. But that was from Louisiana.
So, Charles, going off of your scenario and Vince's answer, Oklahoma's doing that right now. We are in a budget crisis, and we were forced to cut statewide millions and millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And the decision at the time by the legislature was we were going to maintain infrastructure, so the maintenance routine budget had to be preserved. I got a little bit more, as a matter of fact, but there had to be cuts. The cuts we made were just what Vince was saying. We are not buying any equipment this year. Luckily, we were able to prove that the fleet is fairly young enough to where it can survive for 2 years without any replenishment. There's a contingency built into that. Mowing, we're cutting back completely on mowing. We're doing 1 full width mow for this summer and 2 safety mows, and that's it. There's a lot of other projects that are being cut, but the director's current mission, at least during this crisis, is to maintain a good public perception, which is why the cuts were pushed towards anything that could give the department a bad perception. And the one thing that we know would give us a bad perception is if the infrastructure goes down during the crisis.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Alex. Thanks. Again, if you're thinking about mowing, it's kind of that classic thing what Finn said. It's not, unless it gets to be 3 feet high, it's not a safety issue. It is an aesthetic issue though, and that's kind of interesting. But again, I think maybe it's a little bit to do with that benefit cost kind of ratio thing in there. So being able to kind of model what the benefit you get per dollar allows you to work out what to cut in some ways, because that's what these guys are kind of doing intuitively in their heads when they're asked to cut, or when you guys are asked to cut.
With the question we just asked, there's the inverse of that too. And that's what do you do with the additional money you get? How do you distribute that? And we're getting kind of close to the end of the session. And so I'm going to skip that part of it, but that's something I want you to think about. And Now, the big question is, what type of tools do you feel like that you need to help you with budget planning and budget execution in your maintenance area? And how can we help you develop those tools and make that process easy for you? Yes.
And then also under MAP 21, there was a mandate to have a risk-based plan, you know, and I don't know how much of that is going to carry over to FAST Act, but is that something you are concerned about, or you have thought about how you would like implemented? Because that's definitely something we're going to be taking a look at.
Good comment. Is anyone already including risk in their maintenance budgets?
Benefit cost, though, you know. It's reducing risk per dollar. You know. Want any bright ideas? You know, Philip.
Okay. Well, you know, I want to thank you for all your comments. We will certainly take a look at the comments and start looking at how we might improve things to help you in the maintenance planning area. And I think all the comments that we got were great, and do thank you for attending this afternoon. And also thanks to Charles and Derek for their help in delivering this session. Thank y'all.
Thanks, folks.